Hello, my name is Luke, and this presentation is an analysis of Newcastle United and the core issues within the club. I hope you find this to be an insightful presentation with many key takeaways. Opening with an overview of Newcastle United's history will provide insight into the club's formation and significant milestones over the years. Listed below are the three key issues I've decided to base my presentation on, covering each on a general and club level. The first of these is an assessment of the club's transgression regarding ownership, away from a localised business model and into the global scene, and how this impact the risen issues coinciding with it. Here, we'll examine the club's ownership model, how it shifted, focusing on the concept of sports washing, highlighting the intersection of sports and societal issues as the dominating issue throughout. I will then discuss the role of fans. Newcastle United has a passionate fan base. We'll explore how these supporters have reacted to the ownership change and how fan base is reforming in the modern era of football. Lastly, we'll touch upon NUFC and women. This section will address the involvement and impact of women within the club, reflecting on how the role of women in football has evolved over time. Now to touch upon the rich history of Newcastle United. Stanley FC of Byker was established in 1881, originating from a cricket team, and was renamed Newcastle East End in 1882. Newcastle West End was founded in 1882 and played their home games at St James's Park. East End eventually took over West End's lease due to financial complications and rebranded as Newcastle United from 1892. Throughout the 20th century, they achieved significant success, winning 4 league titles, 6 FA Cups, and the Fairs Cup. Let's delve into the history of Newcastle United in recent years, highlighting some pivotal moments that have shaped the club in recent years. Firstly, facing relegation twice from the Premier League in the 2008-09 and 2015-16 seasons, bouncing back immediately on both occasions, winning the championship in the following campaign. This resilience is a testament to the club's determination and spirit through hardship. Moving forward, a significant achievement came with qualification for the Champions League in both the 2022-23 and the 2024-25 season. In that same year, Newcastle ended their 56-year trophy drought by winning the Carabao Cup in 2025. Newcastle United were previously owned by local businessman John Hall from 1992 into 2007. He was immensely popular amongst the Geordies, wanting to build a starting 11 entirely out of local players, as Newcastle rose to compete for the Premier League title in the mid-90s. Mike Ashley took over when Hall's tenure ended. This saw a shift for Newcastle whereby the owner possessed a real disconnect with the club and its fans, ultimately captured in the short-term renaming of the historic St James's Park into the Sports Direct Arena in 2011 for personal monetary gain. Now let's talk about the current ownership of Newcastle United. In October 2021, after 4 years of negotiations and overcoming significant opposition, the club underwent major takeover. This marked a turning point for Newcastle, injecting the club with investment and newly formed ambition. One key aspect of the takeover was overcoming resistance to the potential state ownership. This delayed the takeover for 4 years, with Amanda Staveley's persistence proving to push the deal through, with more details on this to follow in the next slide. The Public Investment Fund, or PIF, now hold an increased 85% stake in the club as of Staveley's exit, and the Reuben brothers seeing an increase to 15% in Newcastle United as of July 2024. This shift in ownership structure has been pivotal in the club's recent success, including victory in the Carabao Cup in 2025. As we move forward, we'll explore some of the broader complications and controversies surrounding the ownership, including the concept of sports washing. The term sports washing was birthed in the modern age of sport, meaning to subvert the way that others attend to moral violation, and ultimately manipulate one's own perception through sport. As the Premier League has established itself as a global platform since its formation, it therefore is an ideal method for foreign governments to target through club ownership. Possessing control over one of its clubs is a colossal business. Sports washing is a fundamentally Orientalist concept, with 55% of Premier League teams being owned by American investors. The focus regarding sports washing is entirely on Eastern owners. Newcastle United's owners face scrutiny due to the blurred lines between the Public Investment Fund and Saudi government, with the PIF being controlled by Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is a central figure in the Saudi governing state. This is despite legally binding assurances the Premier League have provided to disassociate the PIF from the government in Saudi Arabia. The independent football regulator has since been introduced as a means of assessing the responsibility of new owners, protecting the integrity of football clubs from the possibility of harmful new ownership, from ultimately integrating sports washing into English football. Let's explore the fan opposition that emerged against the PIF's ownership of Newcastle United. NUFC fans against sports washing has taken a strong stance, especially during the 2021-22 season, with matchday protests becoming increasingly noticeable. These passionate supporters are not just challenging ownership, they're highlighting critical issues around the morality of the Saudi state and its human rights record. This organisation challenges fans to consider the broader implications of the ownership and look past the monetary prevalence that it coincides with, as a means of disassociating Newcastle United from the terrible reputation held by the Saudi state regarding human rights. The official website of the organisation features these two images. The first utilises a Newcastle United shirt to reveal the issue of modern-day slavery with the club's sleeve sponsor, Noon. The largest and most prominent photo on the website is of Jalalabad. The 30-year-old was executed by the Saudi government for attending the funerals of people shot by security forces and attending protests against the government. NUFC fans against sports washing push forth the notion that they do not want Newcastle United to be associated with modern-day slavery and execution, with the ultimate goal of an ownership change despite recent successes on the pitch. Now delving into football fans. Drawing upon Giulianotti's foundational insights from 2002 and Wolsey in 2021, football fandom is more than just a pastime. It's a shared space where community and identity converge. However, these spaces have evolved significantly. With the introduction of all-seater stadia and rising ticket costs, the landscape of fandom has shifted. The places that once felt communal and built for the traditional working-class football fan are now somewhat exclusive, instigating this shift from traditional supporters to more consumer-oriented fans. This change is compounded by reduced tolerance for violent behaviour, which, whilst the change is ultimately positive, leads to a sense of disempowerment amongst fans, feeling under control in these previously dominated spaces. This transition signifies more than just a change in seating arrangements or ticket costs. It represents a broader shift in fan culture and identity. Fans, once powerful voices in sport, now find themselves navigating a newly established reality whereby their influence is diminishing. When examining the general fan response to the new ownership of Newcastle United, it's important to recognise the role of globalisation in football and the geopolitical issues it may attract. Newcastle fans are often seen as complicit and accepting of ties to these issues in the Saudi regime. The underperforming sleeping giant status of Newcastle under Mike Ashley's ownership has perhaps made fans more willing to embrace change, even if it means overlooking significant morality concerns. As the club shifts focus from its local roots to a broader, more global perspective, its distinctiveness fades. This transition can leave dedicated fans feeling disconnected from the sense of community once held. Newcastle United is a club proud of its history and local foundations, which ultimately simmers out at the expense of global expansion of the club as a business. Now, shifting focus onto the less globalised women's sector of the sport. The FA issued a ban in 1921 on women's football. This decision was rooted in attempts to preserve what was deemed the female identity. However, it could be deducted that this was merely a method of protecting the men's game and the existing patriarchal structures after men returned from war to England. Women's football returned in the 1960s, yet this was marked by the notion that gender differences had become naturalised and fixed. This idea, as Williams in 2006 noted, shows how the traditional gender roles continue to influence the control of women's football and societal perceptions from the early 20th century upon the reintroduction of women's football. Now let's focus the discussion onto women and Newcastle United specifically. I've sourced information from Newcastle United's own Gender Pay Gap report from 2025, which is available on the club website. It's noteworthy that the club may restrict some information from being published that may hurt their image, as this type of information is normally privatised. Female employees at the club are receiving slightly greater bonus proportions than their male counterparts. This may encourage more females to work for Newcastle United and enter a male-dominated sphere across all levels, as demonstrated below by the pay quartile statistics. The openness of the availability of these statistics is commendable, but as the club itself acknowledges, there is still work to do. This is a positive step from the new owners, but also could be rebutted that the reputation in Saudi Arabia regarding poor women's rights record has led the majority Saudi-owned Newcastle United to develop the role of women in the club as a beneficiary to their own public image as a means of sports washing. Amanda Staveley, as part of the ownership previously, was integral to the development of the role of women in the club, specifically through the investment and effort put into the rise of Newcastle United women until their departure in 2024. She played a pivotal role in forming the Takeover Consortium as the leading figure in PCP Capital Partners, tirelessly working for over 4 years prior to the takeover to see the deal through. Now to further discuss the role of Newcastle United Women FC and its journey to become a key part of the club as a whole. Founded in 1989, the team has evolved significantly over the years. In August 2022, they became fully integrated into Newcastle United under the new ownership, which was a pivotal moment in their history. As previously mentioned, this integration could be perceived as a strategic move by the ownership as a means of counteracting criticism regarding the treatment of women, which is associated with the Saudi ownership of the club. Achievements on the pitch followed as a result of the financial backing of new ownership, after previous neglect from Mike Ashley. Back-to-back successful promotion campaigns in 2022-23 and 2023-24 have brought them to the Women's Championship where they sit currently. As we look at Newcastle United Women FC, it's clear they are not just a football team, but a symbol of progress and integration within the club and the broader football community, albeit overshadowed once again with criticism of the ownership of Newcastle United and the negative implications carried alongside it. So now let's reflect on the journey Newcastle United Football Club has undergone. We're witnessing the transition of a locally centralised community club into a global business powerhouse on the biggest stage. Fan reaction to this has been mixed. Some embrace the new era, while others still hold on to traditional identities. Significant strides have been taken to integrate women as a core part of Newcastle United, although the club itself admits further development is a necessity. And thank you very much for listening to this examination of Newcastle United, and I hope you found this to be very insightful.